Hello everyone, this is Sarah Sladen, Director of the Youth Economic Opportunities Network at Making Sense International. The YEO Network is a global hub dedicated to advancing knowledge exchange, collaboration, and action among the full range of stakeholders working to expand youth economic opportunities. The Apply It webinar series is one of 4 interconnected activities that support our work, and today we're pleased to welcome 247 people registered from 48 countries. Thanks to everyone for joining today's discussion. We welcome your questions and contributions throughout this virtual learning event. Please write them in the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen. We also invite you to tweet and to post to Facebook key points that you take away from this event using the hashtag GYEO. Today's moderator is Dr. Christina Olenek, Vice President for Technical Services at Making Sense International. In her 25-year career, Christy has designed, implemented, and evaluated holistic youth programs for multiple donors, local governments, and private foundations in the U.S. and internationally. As VP for Technical Services, Christy is responsible for technical leadership, service delivery, business development, and strategy around positive youth development programming. Christy also serves as Making Sense Project Director for the USAID-funded Youth Power Evidence and Evaluation IDIQ. She's passionate about providing opportunities for youth success and for building the capacity of the systems around them. In fact, she's learned a lot about youth development from her teenage daughter. Thank you again, Christy. Over to you to introduce our speakers and lead today's discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks to all of you for joining us. We are really excited to see the turnout today. We had, as Sarah said, over 200 people sign up, so that's very exciting. I'd like to take a moment and introduce the speakers for today. We're going to have Mr. Mamadou Biteye, Managing Director of the Africa Regional Office from the Rockefeller Foundation. Mamadou oversees the Foundation's work across Africa, bringing with him decades of experience and expertise in the development sector in Africa. In his capacity as Managing Director, he provided strategic guidance to Rockefeller's Digital Jobs Africa initiative and the Scaling World-Class Demand-Driven Training Project, which we're talking about today. We also have Branka Minic, advisor for Making Sense International. Branka spent more than 25 years in the staff industry, most notably working as Senior Director of Global Corporate and Government Affairs at Manpower Group. Branka has served as a Senior Technical Advisor to Making Sense International on this project, the Rockefeller Foundation-funded Scaling World-Class Demand-Driven Training Project, and she's the lead author and researcher of both the Demand-Driven Training Framework and the Toolkit. We're going to hear from 2 projects affiliated with the Toolkit. Our first speaker will be Tiffany Humphreys. She's the Project Manager and Operations Officer for Maharishi Institute and Impact Sourcing Academy. Tiffany is the Project Manager and Operations Officer at Maharishi in South Africa, Durban. In this capacity, she's focused on building relationships to create opportunities for developing and placing financially marginalized students into work who've attended either the short-term skills program through the Academy or the longer-term degree qualifications program through the Institute. Finally, we have Hannah El-Feki, Business Development and Compliance Officer with the Education for Employment in Egypt. Hannah is taking the place of Ismail El-Habrouk, Chief Executive Officer of EFC Egypt. As he was unable to make it today, we really appreciate Hannah stepping in. EFE provides underprivileged and unemployed Egyptian youth with the skills and opportunities necessary for formal entry into the labor market. EFE Egypt creates original curricula and delivers training programs that respond directly to market needs and the needs of private sector employers. So I'm going to just give a little bit of background. On this project, I served as Project Director for Making Sense. As you can see from this slide, Making Sense has been researching and writing on the subject of demand-driven training since 2014, when we completed a landscape review of youth skills gaps in technology with Microsoft and introduced the demand-driven training concept. We then began our relationship with Rockefeller in 2015 by conducting research and writing a report on best practice screening tools for youth employment programming. In 2016, we started our current project, Scaling World-Class Demand-Driven Training, which has been focused on developing a framework of demand-driven training for youth employment programs and bringing together tools and resources to help providers better align youth training programs to employer needs. Earlier this year, we published the Demand-Driven Training Framework Report, which provides background on the DDT concept and profiles 10 leading demand-driven training organizations, synthesizing their common elements and operating practices, as well as capturing their critical processes and lessons learned. The recently released Demand-Driven Training for Youth Employment Toolkit is designed to help bridge the gap between youth skills and employer needs by bringing forward detailed descriptions and examples of the best demand-driven training practices, along with tools and resources that can be used by youth employment training providers to better align with the labor market. We hope the toolkit will also be used as a platform to create discussion between training providers and employers to ensure that systems are set up in such a way that youth have a strong bridge to cross as they move from education to employment. The next slide shows the toolkit as a result of research conducted with 10 demand-driven training organizations, 5 from South Africa and 5 that have a global footprint. They have all been wonderful partners, sharing their time and expertise, and you'll hear from 2 of them today. I will say that while the toolkit is meant for a global audience, it does have a South African flair and is currently being disseminated there through the work of a local partner. In fact, we held a formal launch event in South Africa and provided individual consultations with organizations interested in using the toolkit. The next slide shows the purpose of our today's webinar. What we really want to do today is provide you with background on the importance of demand-driven training, introduce you to the Demand-Driven Training for Youth Employment Toolkit, share with you 2 demand-driven training exemplar models, and set the stage so that you and your organization can use the toolkit to support your own work. As you listen to our speakers, I ask that you put your questions in the chat box, as we do plan to have some time for Q&A at the end of the session. So now I'd like to turn it over to Mamadou Bite from Rockefeller Foundation so that he can offer his thoughts on demand-driven training and the toolkit. Mamadou, are you there? I think we need to unmute.
Hello? Hello, can
yes.
you hear me?
Thank
yes,
you, Mamadou.
I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christy. I'm very pleased to join this webinar, and I really want to thank you and commend you, your team, and the whole Making Sense International for your strong partnership. But I can see also in the list of attendants I recognize many partners also with Digital Jobs Africa. But what I would like to say before commenting on the toolkit is for many of the participants who do not know about Digital Jobs Africa and the Rockefeller Foundation, which is a private philanthropy with the mission of promoting the well-being of humanity worldwide. So what the fundamental determinants of human well-being vary and also across time and circumstances, but we can say that in our times, one of the biggest barriers to human well-being is unemployment. It is a global issue, and it affects mostly young people, and it is very acute here in Africa, where the population, it is the youngest youth population in the world, and this youth population is growing faster than the economy is growing, hence then less opportunities for jobs. The second challenge is also the gap between skills provided by the education sector and the skills and abilities needed by employers. So this is why in 2013 the Rockefeller Foundation launched a $100 million initiative called Digital Jobs Africa, to pioneer solutions that can help make a dent into the youth and employment challenge as we experience it, and bring about lessons that could be applicable not only across Africa but also beyond Africa. And Digital Jobs Africa was looking at three things. One is working really with employers to connect the demand side with actually the supply side by working also with training institutions to provide the training that was needed by the market. And thirdly, to work with governments in the countries we had selected to also bring work with them to develop policies and incentives that would allow for both the demand side to grow, but also the training side also to provide the outcomes that we were looking for. So we supported impact sourcing, which is an inclusive hiring practice for employers based not on corporate social responsibility, but based on a strong business case for employing a particular segment of the youth if they had the skills that were required and what the benefits were for these employers to look at this, to tap into this talent pool. Since then, now last year, a global impact sourcing coalition has been launched in South Africa with 10 members, and a year later it grew to over 40 corporate members who are all working together to advance the field of impact sourcing, promoting it, codifying it, and most recently with our partner Business for Social Responsibility, they launched actually an impact sourcing standard. All of that is really promoting inclusive hiring practice and increasing the opportunity. The other side was also how do you provide to those corporates that are embracing impact sourcing to make sure that they have the talent pool that they need to tap into. This is why we worked also with many organizations to look at efficient demand-driven training models that are cost-effective, that are scalable, that are connected to a jobs pipeline, which would allow young people to be able to connect it to jobs upon graduation. But even if that didn't happen, for the young people to be actually equipped with the skills they need that would allow them actually to be more resilient and work up the ladder in the job market. So we've had a real fantastic experience working with many organizations, from training, apprenticeship, different models were tested. So as we are winding down now Digital Jobs Africa, after proving that this approach can work through the training of over 150,000 young people as of the beginning of 2017, out of which over 50,000 have been directly placed into jobs. We've seen many barriers that have been removed by this approach. We've decided to work with Making Sense International to really look at all of these models that have been implemented over the years and that have proven successful. How do you take the best practices from these different training models and bring them in the form of a framework and a toolkit and a sample curricula that could be available to those who are in the sector, in the practice of training, as they are look at improving their practice, or to those who want to get into the sector, but also importantly to government, so that this kind of training can be incorporated into TVET and generally in the education sector, to also address that market failure, which is that billions of dollars goes into the education sector in many countries in Africa, but are not yielding the result or the product that the market needs. So this is the whole story and the whole motivation why we've partnered with Making Sense International to produce this toolkit. Branka will be working you through the toolkit, but the few things I want to say is that it's really interactive toolkit. It is something that you can look at really, and it is highly adaptable to your needs. And this is something that I think that you will enjoy taking cognizance of today for those of you who will be engaging with it for the first time today. But I really also want to encourage you to also help in terms of how, if you have comments, input, how this can be improved, but also to talk about the toolkit around you. And I think that in the way we can have impact in helping young people gain the skills that would allow them to address the barriers to their employment, this toolkit will play a significant role. So I would really commend you and urge you to really help in the dissemination of the toolkit as well. So without further ado, I will stop it there and also thank all the partners that have contributed through their knowledge, their experience to making this tool a reality. But I want to also say that it is in the end just a tool, it will be only effective if all the other elements and aspects of the system also are functioning to make it work. But it is obviously a great ingredient and input into the issue. So with that, I want to thank you, and I want to pass it on back to Branka or Christy. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mamadou. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful working with you as a partner, and you're so right. It's all about the people who are going to disseminate the toolkit that will make the difference. So now I'm going to turn it over to Branka, who will give you an introduction to the toolkit. Branka?
Thank you, Christy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I see many of you are dialing in from far distant places, and that makes us very happy. So obviously in the 10 minutes that I have, I won't be able to give you the full presentation of the toolkit. I hope that we will have another chance to talk about the toolkit in detail. What I will try to do today is 5 things. One is to maybe define DDT, demand-driven training, to make sure that we are all on the same page. The second thing, to talk a little bit about why did we focus on demand-driven training and DDT organizations. Then I will tell you a bit about the organization of the toolkit, how it is structured. Most importantly, I would like to share with you how you can use, benefit, and leverage the toolkit in your own work. I know from the list of registered participants that we have a number of different youth employment stakeholders on the phone, so I will try to address each of the groups with what could be your way of using this toolkit. And finally, I would like to close with some suggestions on how we can work together on furthering this type of work, and also obviously for the benefit of our young people everywhere. So as an independent consultant and also as an advisor to Making Sense, I have spent many, many years in youth employment, and specifically working with organizations that are very successful in transitioning young people from school to work, or from unemployment and inactivity to meaningful employment. What we observed together with Making Sense is that there are really a number of different types of trainings that prepare young people for jobs. We tried to classify them into 3 major groups. This work was done as part of our project for Microsoft, and at that time we defined 3 types of training programs: demand-aware, demand-aligned, and demand-driven. Now, this is not to say that one of these types of programs is better than the other. It's just to acknowledge that different focus and different priorities make these programs slightly different in their design, their implementation, and also in their outcomes. So the first group of demand-aware programs are those training programs that target jobs in the high-growth sectors, and they focus on developing work readiness skills in young people. So this type of program prepares young people for the broadest number of positions, and therefore they are less successful in putting every single person in the job, but they can address the needs of a much broader group of young people and also a much broader group of employers. They also are less costly and usually shorter in duration. The second group of programs are demand-aligned programs. Those are sector-focused programs. They usually focus on training people for jobs in one particular sector, but for a wide range of job roles in that particular sector. They combine the work readiness with job skills, but they are not necessarily specific to one particular job role. And then finally, demand-driven programs are those programs that are very much engaged with a particular employer and a set of very specific job roles, and they prepare young people both in terms of their soft and hard skills for a very specific job opportunity. These programs have a very high success rate. Organizations we studied sometimes achieve better than 85% placement rate, better than 90% retention over a long period of time. These programs are obviously more specific, more costly, and also usually longer in duration. So what we said is, let's focus on these demand-driven training programs and let's look at what makes them so successful. What are their best practices and what are the processes that they follow to achieve such outcomes? Learning from these programs could provide information for all other youth employment projects in terms of ideas how to maybe improve a particular process. So when we worked with the Rockefeller Foundation and our partners in South Africa, really the target audience there was their TVET system and technical colleges, thinking how those institutions of education and training could be better aligned in their programs with the labor market demand, and therefore ultimately providing a better solution to youth unemployment in South Africa. So those are the reasons why we focused on demand-driven training and the organizations we studied. That doesn't mean that there are not other excellent organizations who are also very much market focused and provide young people with excellent skills for joining the labor force. Now let's go to the contents page of the toolkit. I would like to show you how we organized our work. So we identified specific processes that these organizations follow to prepare young people for employment. And out of all those processes, we picked some that we felt were the most conducive to high outcomes in the labor market. So that is why this toolkit is organized with a list of following modules: understanding labor market information, partnering with employers and others, screening, assessing, and profiling, developing soft skills, mentoring youth, implementing work-based learning, and then monitoring and evaluation. So those are the modules we picked to cover in detail, and I will use specifically the mentoring youth module to show you how each module is organized. So let's go now. So you can basically click on the mentoring youth module. As Mamadou said, this is an interactive tool that is available at no cost on the Making Sense website and on various other locations. So every module has very specific sections. We first try to define the topic of mentoring, and to highlight some characteristics or classifications of this particular process in the first few pages. So here we're talking about what is mentoring, we're talking about characteristics of a good mentor, and also about appreciative inquiry, a very specific approach to mentoring that is gaining in attention and in results. So on the next page, let's go to the next page, we have different types of mentoring defined. And this gives you the lay of the land, the definition of some terms, so that we know that we're not talking about job coaching. We're not talking here about specific hard skills, assistance that employers may provide to an individual on the job. We're talking about specific mentoring for developing behavioral skills, soft skills of the young person. Okay? And then on the next page, we talk about the benefits of mentoring youth. We divide these benefits turned to different groups of stakeholders. In this case, the mentee, the mentor, the educator, and the employer. Okay, so these are from our research of the literature and also from the research of these organizations. And then on the next page, we talk about best practices, and these best practices are divided into each sub-process of the mentoring process. Now, I would like to also sign a waiver here that this toolkit does not provide you with a step-by-step process algorithm of how you can implement a mentoring program. For that, we would need really to write a book. But this gives you some practical advice for many of you who are already engaged with these programs, some ideas on how to improve possibly what you're doing, or maybe just validate that you are doing the right thing, because this is also what many other organizations are experiencing. And then finally, we have some examples of the mentoring programs. So if we go further, if we flip to a couple more pages, yes, so we have a number of examples of good mentoring programs with links to those organizations or these particular programs, so that you can, from these short descriptions, really learn more about these excellent case studies. And what we also have for you, if you go here on the bottom of the page and you click on this little magnifying glass, you go directly to resources and references that are related to different types of processes. So we have a whole list of resources and references that are related to mentoring. So this is the organization of the toolkit. Now, if I would like to give you the advice on how to benefit and leverage this toolkit, I'm thinking of three groups of you. One is a group of those who are investing, implementing, or managing a youth employment project. I believe that this toolkit could be a reference guide to some of the best practices across the continuum of activities necessary to synchronize a good youth project. So I hope that you could go to this toolkit and basically consider these best practices as you are evaluating or designing or possibly assessing the design of the youth program. Now, if you're in another group, if you're an education or training organization, or if you're involved in transforming such an organization as a consulting partner, then I believe that this toolkit and some tools that are also on the website related to DDT Toolkit can offer you a benchmark for assessing and improving processes in order to better align the supply and demand for skills. So we used one such tool in South Africa for assessing organizations and their demand alignment, and it was very well received, and it was very beneficial to basically start the conversation on what can we do better to prepare youth for the labor market demand. And then finally, if you are a researcher, a consultant, or a student involved in youth employment or training for employment projects, then we hope that the framework that we have brought together gives you the base for further research. The framework brings inputs, outputs, processes, stakeholders, and references, and hopefully this will be beneficial in your work. So to close, how can we work together? Well, number one, this toolkit is a work in progress. It's a live document, and we invite you to let us know your comments, your suggestions, or maybe additional examples or references or your best practices, and even corrections if we made a mistake. That also could have happened. The second thing is, during the compilation of this project, we gathered a solid experience in assessing various programs and organizations in youth employment space. Maybe we can work together. Maybe we can assist you. Maybe we can have a brainstorming session and share our experiences, learn from your experiences, and possibly advance the work that you're doing in such a way. So we do invite you to contact us and to continue this conversation. In South Africa, the consultation sessions that we had after the launch were very, very well received, and as a result of that, we hope to develop additional partnering projects. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope also to answer any questions you might have. So back to you, Christy.
Thank you so much, Branka. That was a great intro to the toolkit. And now we're going to move to talking to two of our exemplar projects in demand-driven training. And I'd like to pass it to Tiffany Humphreys from Maharishi Institute. Tiffany, are you there? I don't think we can hear you, Tiffany. Do you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, sorry, not sure what that was about. Okay, hi everyone. Impact Sourcing Academy and the Maharishi Institute was a grantee of the Rockefeller Foundation back in 2014 when we started investigating and working with impact sourcing directly with the Rockefeller Foundation. The Impact Sourcing Academy is a project of the Maharishi Institute and focuses more on short-term training, where we do short-term training for youth and placing them straight into the workplace, while the Maharishi Institute focuses more on a long-term degree program, which is focused on business administration degree. But what happens is while they're doing the long-term degree program, there's also an opportunity for the students to do the shorter-term program where they get to work while studying to help support them along that route. And that short-term program is embedded into the longer-term degree program. So our focus is really on those three levels. One is that training and directly into the workplace. The other is training and into a entry-level workplace while still studying. And the other is getting them skilled up to that level of degree and then placement into the workplace. And over the last 14 years, we've helped educate over 17,050 unemployed youth, and 95% of which are currently employed. And we were asked to be a participant on the program for the demand-driven training toolkit with Making Sense and the Rockefeller Foundation. And I'd just like to share some of the experiences on this. So just as the toolkit was very interactive, the development of the toolkit was also very interactive. There wasn't a case of where we were contacted in a remote area and asked to give our information on whether it be recruitment or mentoring. It really was a coming together and meeting of minds of organizations from America to South Africa that were really looking at solving or exploring how we can help with youth unemployment. And so when I say that there's shared information, it wasn't like one organization was holding back on information while the other one was sharing. Everybody was equally sharing, although we sometimes work in the same space as each other. And that was very refreshing to be a part of that. So when it came to recruitment, we were able to see what our colleagues were doing in the market and what our competitors were doing in the market. And not only were we sharing the information, but we were also sharing experiences around that information. So the different soft skill programs that we were going on and the different mentoring programs. And so as we were sharing the experiences and sharing the information, we were also learning from the experiences going on. And I can say that the information that's in the toolkit has really given a solid foundation in terms of how do we learn and how do we grow from the information that's out there that comes from years and years of research and years of trial and error to really, as I said before, to tackle the youth unemployment. And then there was a celebration of the toolkit, and as both Chrissy and Branka have said, that we had the launch event in South Africa, and at the launch event each organizer, well, there was a representative of each of the topics explored. So from recruitment, the best of practice was able to be shared from a recruitment perspective, and from the soft skills perspective, the best of practice was represented and shared from that soft skills perspective, and once again from the mentoring and on the job. And I found that there were organizations that were doing on the job training better than we were in some areas. So it was really about listening to what they were doing, listening to what challenges they had, and seeing how that aligned to our organization and saying, okay, well, that doesn't really fit with our organization because of that, or does fit with our organization because of that, and then either taking it on or not taking it on. There were certain things which I could see that we were doing really well at, and things that we could do better at. And then also understanding where I've been experiencing challenges in the environment, why somebody else might be getting it right, and why the environment that I'm trying to get in right, and it might not happen in the same way. So really exploring that, having a look at that, and then in that launch, then it had the opportunity to click on those interactive links. And I remember going up to Branka and afterwards and saying, oh, I can see what you were trying to do. And those links take you directly not just to the projects as they are right now in 2017, but updated as the information updates. And it's not just information on the recruitment and the soft skills, it's information on the market and what's happening with the market, what's happening with organizations, what's happening with training. And this is a very big part for me, is that it's always linked, and Mamadou mentioned it when he was talking, it's how it has to actually link to organizations and what organizations are wanting. And the toolkit is linking to where there are those challenges in the market about what organizations are wanting. And you could be doing training, and if organizations are wanting it, and which is why the demand-driven training part of it is so critical to understanding that the whole toolkit. And even when sharing the information, expanding that thinking, it was really about understanding also what operations are wanting. When you're working with youth that have never been exposed to working environments, what sort of operational level suits them better, but also gives them the highest opportunity for career growth in the careers that they're wanting to grow in, or that careers that will support them. So that then brings me to things which ISA love about the toolkit, which is also MI, is the online links to real data and meaningful case studies. And this is also what I love about Making Sense, is that they make it real. And so these case studies are things that have happened, challenges that people have experienced, building on the strength of each project, understanding each project, easy reading of the toolkit. Once you start clicking through the toolkit, it becomes very interactive and very engaging. And if you want to go to different possible tools for recruitment and different surveys and different assessments, you just click and it takes you there. And then the industry information for demand-driven training, which I already spoke about. So I personally like to use it for understanding the market for expansion and replication of our own model, as I've already engaged a lot with the different case studies and with the different projects, and also as a benchmark for understanding the market and what's happening. But as Mamadou says, is we've got to understand that it's a toolkit, and we used to have this thing is that you've got to use the right tool for the right problem, and then you're able to solve that problem. And if the problem is demand-driven training, then this is one of the right tools that you can use to try and analyze your problem and come up with solutions that are going to fit you. But don't just fit it in, say, oh, well, they did this, let us do that. So that was my experience on being a participant of the toolkit development and as a grantee of the Rockefeller Foundation for impact sourcing. Back to you, Christy.
Thank you, Tiffany. We really appreciate your partnership and your presentation today. So now I'm going to hand it over to Hannah Outtakes from Education for Employment. Hannah, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, great. Thank you, Hannah.
Perfect. So for starters, I'd just like to thank everyone for involving us in this conversation and inviting us to this webinar. It is really helpful to get to see how other organizations are using the toolkit and the different experiences with different models of demand-driven training, and to be able to exchange learnings in that regard. So thank you. I'd like to start off by just giving a brief introduction of what EFC really does and what EFC Egypt in particular has lately been doing, and then from there on, I think the conversation will naturally evolve into how we've really used the toolkit in our strategic thinking over the past year and how we plan to continue to utilize it moving forward. Broadly speaking, EFC is a network of organizations that focuses on demand-driven training and prioritizes linking youth to the world of work throughout the MENA region. EFC Egypt is an affiliate to EFC Global as part of the EFC network, and we have been implementing demand-driven training in Egypt since 2009. We do that through two different variations of programs. So the first is career directions training, mainly focusing on CV writing and interviewing skills to university students, public university students in Egypt. And the second, which is actually our flagship program and the most relevant to the demand-driven training model, is our job placement training program. So broadly speaking, the job placement training program is a program that focuses on soft skill capacity building plus technical skills that are in demand, to link unemployed youth from disadvantaged backgrounds to income-generating opportunities in Egypt. To date, we've trained as a network over 45,000, and in Egypt, we've linked approximately 5,000 youth to the world of work. Over the past year, our thinking has really focused on what are our strategic priorities for the next few years. And we've identified two, the first of which is scalability, and the second of which is sustainability. So with scalability, we're looking at how we can do more programming. We're really asking ourselves if our demand-driven training model is something that we can scale across Egypt to be able to increase our training numbers and impact more youth. The second is sustainability, focusing mainly on two things. So firstly, how can our programs stay relevant? And additionally, operationally, how can we sustain the operations of the organization? And these two questions naturally lead us to really refer back to the demand-driven training toolkit to kind of see the different variations. So historically, we've been focusing on demand-driven training in the sense that our programs are in partnership with specific employers and adopt a pre-committed model, which means that before launching a program, we'd approach specific employers in specific sectors, find out what specific jobs they're lacking, what specific skills they need, and implementing a program in partnership with a specific employer. This is historically what we've been doing, and the benefits of that is that it leads to really positive outcomes in terms of job placement rates and job retention rates, because these are programs that are customized specifically for each employer. However, when we come to think of scalability, we find that the demand-driven training model on its own in that regard might be limiting, because while it leads to really positive outcomes in terms of job placement, it is limiting as to how many specific employers we can be talking to at the same time and how we can synchronize our timelines with the timelines of specific employers, because oftentimes we get an employer that's looking to hire right now, and by the time we customize a specific curriculum for them based on their input, and then we do the participant sourcing based on their specific criteria and the skills that they specifically need. By the time we conduct the training program and we graduate the youth, the employer is probably already in the process of finding people. And so we find that the timelines are really limiting us in terms of scalability, and this has led us to really try to explore the different models and move from a demand-driven model more towards a demand-aligned model, and hopefully more so towards a demand-aware model. And we're doing that in different regards. So the first is adopting a sector-specific approach. So we have been really investing in our research capacity lately to be able to identify key specific growing sectors in Egypt, and accordingly to identify like a set of generic skills across sectors. So we're currently in the process of doing a research project with IDRC, the International Development Research Center, and the Jameel Poverty Action Lab. And what this research aims to do is develop a database of market skills and competencies by identifying key sectors that are growing in Egypt, which have been identified as the retail sector, the hospitality sector, and the IT sector. And then additionally, based on that, to be able to develop sector-specific curricula. And right now, that is what we've been piloting throughout the past year. And we're hoping that this can move us more from a specific employer-specific model towards a demand-aware model. So in addition to the research, with the move in like the difference from one model to the other, we also find that in terms of employer engagement, we've had to also sort of like change or amend the strategy, our employer engagement strategy, because one question we always want to ask ourselves is how can we scale and think more broadly across sectors, but also stay relevant to specific employers. And what we've had to do as a result is really upscale our employer engagement efforts, our marketing efforts, and our partnership efforts. So we've been mainly focusing on increasing our business development efforts. We've recently launched a new business development wing to the organization that prioritizes our expansion of partnerships across not only Egypt, but also across the region and internationally, and to be able to generate more partnerships to support our programming. We've also been really focusing on expanding employer relations, expanding our employer relations department and expanding our employer relations efforts broadly speaking. So being able to engage employers while adopting a sector-specific approach. So for example, we'd be implementing, for example, a retail academy, but then throughout the retail academy, we can also approach specific employers while youth are in training, and for example, approach Majid Al Futtaim, which is one of the biggest retail entities in Egypt today, and invite them over for class visits and allow them to be guest speakers in the program, allow them to volunteer in our programs and to support our mock interview and CV writing trainings and such. And what this does is it covers both ends, right? So it allows us to scale our operations because we're adopting a more sector-specific approach to programming, but it also supports us stay relevant and stay linked to the labor market and continues to engage us with specific employers. Broadly speaking, the toolkit has been instrumental in really guiding our thought process as we adopt a strategy that allows us
Hannah, are you still there? We seem to have lost your audio. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure what happened to Hannah, but I think I'm hoping that she touched on most of the points she was going to make. I don't know who's moving the slides around, but why don't we stop with questions and answers? We'll just go ahead and move to the Q&A portion and hope that Hannah can get her audio working again. So I would just like to let you know, please put your questions in the chat box. We do have a few questions there already, which we'll try to tackle. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we're going to give it a shot. I think probably the most difficult issue and challenge that folks have been bringing up is the engagement of the private sector. Actually keeping employers engaged, creating those strong partnerships. So, Branka, I'm going to pass it to you to maybe say a few words about engaging employers, and then maybe we'll have Tiffany also say a few words about how Maharishi engages employers. Branka, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Christy. I already tried to type into the chat box the module that's partnering with employers and others might provide some useful best practices and suggestions to challenges that all of us are experiencing. This is nothing new, and not just one country has these challenges in really partnering and staying engaged with employers. I think that the way the toolkit can help is that you can also evaluate the stages of your partnership. There are many different stages where you, just like in any relationship, you know, if you think of marriage and being as the most difficult, most complex type of relationship between two people, and when you first start flirting or dating or getting to know each other, becoming friends and so on, the same way a partnership with an employer goes through different stages. And being realistic about at which stage you are will also determine the commitment that you have to each other. So that is one suggestion. Another suggestion is that you have to see that the employers have to basically receive a return on their investment in time and in efforts that they put around either hiring young people without experience or training them through an internship or apprenticeship model. So you need to be very careful as clearly articulating the return on investment to the employer. And so some of those issues are addressed also on the page 15 of the toolkit, where we talk about specific benefits to employers of partnering with youth training providers. So I would just mention those two items. I really encourage you to look at that module, to look at the examples and the references, and please get back to us if you would like to discuss this in more detail.
Thank you, Branka. Tiffany, would you like to say anything about how you've created strong relationships with the private sector with employers?
Okay, for me it's always an interesting topic because without the employers employing at the other end is that you're really not training for anything really. And so with our 95% employment placement rate, it's been an experience for me understanding. I used to think that some companies partnered, like training companies partnered with employers and started up, and that's why they did so well. And then I had the experience of when I did partner with an employer straight away and how it didn't always link because the employer wanted what they wanted, and as a training provider I wanted what I wanted. And in 2016 in Washington, Making Sense had one of their sessions, and it was about employers talking about how they were supporting youth development projects, and youth development projects talking about how they fit into the employer environment, and how exactly like what Branka said, it really is about a relationship and it's about give and take. So for me, the biggest learning and lessons when I'm engaging with employers, and we engage with employers, some international brands such as Accenture and Genpact and Man-Made Media that employ our students on different levels. And as we're engaging with them, it's the understanding that they have an operational demand and we need to fill that operational demand. So sometimes it doesn't always allow for that softer skill and softer transition. So it's about understanding what you do inside your training environment and what you can ask from that operation, and also it's very much understanding what it is that operations want. Because if operations can't accommodate it, at the end of the day, it's their bottom line. And so while we are trying to develop youth and to develop youth into the job position, we've got to understand is that they also have a business to run. And so that for me was the biggest learnings in working with employers as they're employing our students. And the other is the least amount of effort for them, and it's not that they don't care, it's just not their core business. I don't know if that helps.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you, Tiffany. Another question that comes up often is around scalability of the demand-driven training model. And so, Branka, I'm wondering if you might want to say a few words about the focus of the toolkit on the technical vocational education training system and how, that impacted our thinking around scalability, or any other thoughts you have on scaling the model.
Yes, thank you, Christy. So, one of the challenges, obviously, of the DDT youth providers is to reach scale while not compromising on the quality of the very individualized and specialized training and preparation that they provide their young people. That compromise is at the center of the discussion, actually, in the framework. So I also invite you to look at the framework document towards the end on what were some of the conclusions and best practices that we identified regarding to scaling. So that's one comment. The other one is that obviously the scale has to happen through the system of formal education and training through the existing colleges, TVET institutions, the technical universities, and other organizations that are government-run. Therefore, we interviewed also a number of these organizations in South Africa and elsewhere and looked at the literature that specifically targets educational organizations, and we realized that they cannot become a DDT provider such as Harambee or EFC or Maharishi Institute, but they could change some of their individual processes to be more aligned with the demand for skills. And therefore, you will see also some examples of those practices. For example, under the module for labor market information, there are good stories of how some TVET colleges do that in the Philippines, or Miami-Dade Community College and how they partner with the local DDT provider to basically enhance their program. So yes, definitely the scaling is a major issue, and it has to happen through some compromising and learning from each other.
All right, thank you, Branka. We had one question about dissemination of the toolkit, and so what I do want to do is just take a moment and say we would love to work with your organization to help disseminate the toolkit. We will be providing the link to the Demand-Driven Training Toolkit website so that you can search the toolkit and download. There is a website that highlights material from the toolkit document, and you can immediately download the document there. You can also contact us for more information. We anticipate in the future adapting the toolkit to various contexts. We also anticipate creating workshop and training material around the toolkit information. So if you are interested in working with us on that, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Now I'd like to close the session and thank all of our speakers, Mamadou, Branka, Tiffany, Hannah. It looks like Hannah got back in. We're glad to see you back in. I just want to say that in a few moments you'll be directed to an online survey. We ask that you fill out the survey. The Youth Employment Opportunities Network team would very much appreciate you filling it out so that they can create relevant and interesting learning events for you in the future. We want to thank the YEO Network team for hosting the webinar for us today. The webinar has been recorded. Many of you have asked that question. It's been recorded, and it'll be posted on the youtheconomicopportunities.org website. And since you've registered for the webinar, you should be receiving a link. If you found this webinar useful, we hope that you'll promote it and the recording to others. And again, thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.